From how you reply to other characters, to the split-second decisions you make during a scuffle, to whether you peer into an open doorway, nearly every action you make in Detroit feels as though it would impact the game's narrative and, eventually, its final outcome. That's an impressive feat on its own, but this PlayStation 4 SNE exclusive also packs a story that at times punches you square in the gut and at others sends your heart racing. It's not a perfect game. I had problems with the controls at times and quick-time events that felt overwhelming, but this is easily the best title to date from developer Quantic Dream. Detroit tells a story of how the creation of androids impacts the world through the eyes of three different android protagonists: Connor, a negotiator, Kara, a housekeeper, and Marcus, a companion. It does this using a branching narrative system connected by a flowchart. Like previous Quantic Dream offerings, Detroit is more of an interactive story than a traditional video game, so you won't be able to freely explore your world. Instead, you more or less guide your character to different points and interact with objects like doors, televisions, humans, and other androids. Detroit also brings back quick-time events, moments when you have to quickly press a button to perform a certain movement. I'm not a huge fan of quick-time events, which isn't exactly controversial considering they largely went out of fashion in gaming a few years ago. But it's not a huge problem in Detroit, since it's designed to be less of a free-form game. Detroit's controls also felt clunky at times, especially when I was racing around an area trying to locate a missing android. Movement isn't very fluid unless you're playing as Marcus, who can occasionally sprint. But if you're playing as Kara or Connor, you'll feel like your legs are slabs of concrete. Detroit's story covers heavy topics ranging from domestic violence to murder to prostitution, you name it, it's in there. You'll spend time investigating androids that have lost their minds and attack their owners, androids that want to seek freedom and androids that simply want to live a normal life. Connor, an experimental prototype, spends his time investigating deviant androids who have to break free of their original programming and become sentient. In some cases, though, they attack their owners who treated them like disposable objects. Deviants in Detroit are a new occurrence, so your job is to uncover the reason some androids seem to go off the rails, while others don't. Kara is a housekeeper on the run with a young girl whose father was abusing her, while Marcus is a companion to an elderly artist. Kara's story in particular is controversial as it actually shows domestic violence in action. But it's not something used for shock value, rather its purpose is to move the story forward and inform Kara's character. Naturally, Detroit tries to draw some parallels to real-world instances of slavery and discrimination. Androids are only allowed to ride in the backs of buses, are bought and sold like property, have no civil rights and are beaten and killed with little consequence. The message, however, feels too in the nose when an African American character compares the android's suffering to the experiences of African Americans. It's not exactly subtle is what I'm saying. Detroit, Become Human tells a dramatic story about androids seeking to find their own way of living with and among humans. Yes, it's a well-worn sci-fi trope, but the characters in Detroit are compelling enough to make it feel interesting again. There are some issues with controls at times and some story beats that miss the mark, but if you're looking for an impressive story that can be played out in a multitude of ways, dig into Detroit. What's hot? Intriguing characters, plenty of replayability, compelling story. What's not? Controls can feel clunky, requires you to press several buttons to perform tasks, some odd story beats. More from Games News, email Daniel Howley at Dowley@, follow him on Twitter at Daniel Howley. Follow News Pulse Finance on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.